Sheila, it's now 18 months since we changed the way that we do parish share. What are the headlines?
The brilliant news is that the parish share promises that were made have been largely honoured, which means that we've got in roughly what we expected to get. And the even better news about that is that people have been paying it really regularly through the year, so thank you very much indeed for that, because that helps with the cash flow enormously.
So Sheila, what have we learnt from the first year of this new scheme?
We've learned that it's a good scheme for parishes because they know where they are. They've made offers in the range that they expect to be able to pay, and that's borne out because they're paying it, which is brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. We've learned that we need to give a bit more information about what the money is actually used for. For instance, did you know that 44,000 is about the average cost of providing a stipended clergy person? That's the stipend, pension, housing and training cost. That gives some kind of context for the offers to be put into. We've learned that the timing isn't quite right because actually we've asked for the offers too early, so they were very late coming in this year, which has made the budgeting process a bit difficult. But we can alter the budgeting process to make that easier rather than asking parishes to do something so hard so early on in the piece. And we've learned that we need to be realistic in our ask because we need increases in the offers to be at or ahead of inflation.
So overall there has been a reduction for 2014 in terms of offer from parish share. Mm-hmm. What are the numbers like?
We know that nearly half of parishes have offered an increase and a further third have held their offer at the 2013 levels. And given the pressures on all of us now with rising fuel bills in particular and the costs of buildings maintenance, that's not a bad result, but of course it doesn't help us at the centre with meeting the costs of ministry.
Sure. So thinking about the budget as a whole, let's start with what are our sources of income, what are the primary numbers in 2014?
Overall our income is about 9.2 million and you've got the exact figures in the budget tables. Share is about 52% of that. The central contribution from the church commissioners is about 27% of that. And we need to remember that we can't expect that to stay at that level forever. We're probably all right for the next 3 years, but we need to be looking at that being a much smaller proportion of our overall income. We have about 5% of our income from fees and about 4% from houses lettings, and then grants and the use of reserves makes up the rest of it.
And so from an expenditure point of view then, what are the headline expenditure items?
We're looking to spend around about 9.6 million next year, and of course the major one is stipends. I've already talked about the average cost of a clergy stipend being 44,000. Over just around 80% of the budget goes on stipends and the associated costs of that, which is about 7.7 million. That's the cost of providing ministry. Then on top of that you get things like parish support, which is about 3%, education at about 3%, central admin at about 5%, and then various projects and other costs make up the rest of it.
So you mentioned there £9.2 million worth of income and £9.6 million worth of expenditure. That suggests a shortfall of 400,000. What do we do about that and what are the implications of that?
There's a shortfall of about 400,000 which has to come out of reserves essentially. The take on reserves is slightly more than that because the budget includes some targeted use of reserves. So we've already committed inside the budget to using £147,000 worth of reserves to support our houses budget to actually make improvements to the houses. So if you add that into the deficit, altogether we're going to take over £500,000 out of our reserves. We can do that, but we can't keep on doing it forever.
We're planning a new office development. What are the implications and pressures on the budget from that?
The new office will be a capital asset, so it means we'll own it and it will have value to us, so we will be able to sell it if we ever needed to, for instance, although I'm not anticipating that we'll do that. What the implication for next year is that we have to actually pay for it in cash. And so the implications for our cash flow are quite significant, but they won't impact on the main budget as a whole. What we will have to do, though, is to look at how money comes in to make sure we've got enough money available. We will need to borrow some money during next year to make sure that we've got enough to not only pay our bills as we go along, but also to pay the building bills, as it were. But we won't see any other impact in this budget. Next year, in 2015, I hope that what we will see is some significant budget savings and efficiencies, because we'll only have one office instead of two. It'll be more environmentally friendly. We'll have done some upgrading of our IT and our ways of working. So we should see some cost savings in our revenue budget.
Okay, so thinking about the 2015 budget process, I think from what you said, we've learned a lot about how things work now that we have a new scheme for parish share, but we still end up with a £400,000 deficit, or £500,000 in real terms. That's not sustainable, we've said that. What are we going to do differently in the budgeting process in 2015?
What we have to do is to make sure every pound we spend really counts for growth, really counts for strengthening the mission and the ministry of the church and bringing about spiritual and numerical growth. So in 2015, we're going to start the budget process from zero. We're going to look at everything we do, looking for cost savings where we can, but for efficiencies and for the effective deployment of resources. So our resources will be targeted towards the priorities that we set. We'll be looking for savings, and we'll be looking to increase our income as well. We'll obviously be looking for increases in parish share, and I think Bishop Mark's going to talk a bit about a priority of supporting parishes to make offers that are at or above 3% for next year. And we'll also look at our investments and the way we manage those and how we can maximise the return on those.
Obviously, part of that policy will be how we ethically invest those assets.
Absolutely, and we'll need to take some specialist advice about that and make sure that the partners we work with are committed to the same ethical principles as we are.
Is it all bad news, or are we actually moving roughly in the right direction?
No, we are moving roughly in the right direction. One of the things that we did during the year was project what would have happened if we had maintained parish share income at its peak. So when it was at its highest, which was in about 2011, 2012, that year. If we'd been able to sustain that income, then we wouldn't be facing a deficit now. The plain fact of the matter is that we haven't been able to sustain it, but there are very good reasons for that, and we know about that. So I think we're in a good position to move forward with realistic budgeting, with a realistic look at how we make all our assets work for us. And we've got a huge swell of commitment that we see now from the parishes to making this work. We're all in this together, folks.
Just one final question. If you have one thing to say to parishes in the diocese, what would it be?
Keep on growing, keep on going, and thank you very much indeed for all the heroic efforts you make in these tough times to support the ministry that we all need in this diocese.
Sheila, thank you very much.
Thank you.